Sunday dinner at the Harrison family table had always been a tradition, but lately it felt more like a tribunal. Every week I'd sit in the same chair I'd occupied since childhood, watching my family dissect every choice I'd made with the precision of surgeons and the compassion of vultures. "So," my sister Catherine began, cutting her roast beef with deliberate precision, "I heard you turned down another job offer this week. I should have known this would come up. In a family where everyone made it their business to know everyone else's business, privacy was a luxury I'd never been allowed." "It wasn't the right fit," I said simply, taking a sip of water and hoping the conversation would move on to something else. "The right fit?" My brother Michael laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "Jessica, you've turned down 6 job offers in the past 4 months. At what point do you stop being picky and start being realistic?" "Maybe when the offers are worth taking," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the irritation building in my chest. My father set down his fork with a loud clank that made everyone at the table look up. "Worth taking? Jessica, you're 31 years old. You live in a studio apartment that's barely bigger than our walk-in closet. You drive a car that's older than some of our neighbors' children. What exactly are you holding out for?" "Something that aligns with my values," I said quietly. The table erupted in laughter. Not warm family laughter, but the cruel kind that cuts deep and leaves scars. "Your values?" Catherine wiped tears from her eyes. "What values?" "The value of being unemployed. The value of disappointing everyone who cares about you." "I'm not unemployed," I protested. "I freelance. I write content for—" "You write blog posts about cat food," Michael interrupted. "That's not a career, Jessica. That's what college students do for beer money." Mom, who had been silent up until this point, finally spoke. Her voice was calm, measured, and somehow more devastating than all the shouting and mockery combined. "Jessica," she said, looking directly at me with the same expression she'd worn when I was 7 and had broken her favorite vase, "we've been patient with you. We've supported your decisions even when we didn't understand them. We've made excuses for you to our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues." "I never asked you to make excuses for me," I said. "No, you didn't ask," Dad agreed. "But we did it anyway because that's what family does. We protect each other even when one of us is making choices that reflect poorly on the rest of us." The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and suffocating. "But our patience has limits," Mom continued. "And frankly, we're tired of being embarrassed by you." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This conversation felt different from the usual criticism and disappointment. This felt final. "What are you saying?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Catherine and Michael exchanged a look that told me they'd discussed this beforehand. This wasn't a spontaneous family intervention. This was a planned execution. "We're saying that we can't continue to associate with someone who refuses to live up to their potential," Catherine said. "It's affecting our reputations, our business relationships, our social standing." "Your social standing?" I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. "Yes," Michael said firmly. "Do you know how embarrassing it is to tell people that my sister is a 31-year-old freelance blogger? Do you know what that does to my credibility as a financial advisor? And I'm trying to make partner at my law firm," Catherine added. Having a sister who lives like a college student doesn't exactly project the kind of stability and success they're looking for. I looked around the table at these people I'd grown up with, shared holidays with, called family for over 3 decades. They were looking at me like I was a stain they needed to remove from their carefully curated lives. "So what?" I asked. "You want me to take any job, regardless of whether it makes me miserable, just so you can feel better about yourselves at cocktail parties?" "We want you to grow up," Dad said bluntly. "We want you to stop pretending that your principles are more important than your responsibilities." "What responsibilities?" I asked. "I pay my own bills. I take care of myself. I don't owe any of you anything." "You owe us the courtesy of not embarrassing us," Mom said. "You owe us the respect of at least trying to be successful." "I am successful," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I'm doing work I believe in, work that makes a difference." "Writing about cat food makes a difference?" Michael scoffed. "I don't just write about cat food," I snapped. "I write about sustainable living, ethical consumerism, social justice." "Topics that don't pay the bills," Catherine interrupted. "Topics that don't build careers or create stability." Stability isn't everything, I said. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone stopped eating, stopped moving, stopped breathing. Mom's face had gone very pale, and Dad's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. Stability isn't everything? Mom repeated slowly as if she couldn't believe what she'd heard. Jessica, Dad said, his voice dangerously quiet. Your mother and I have worked our entire lives to build stability for this family. We've sacrificed, we've saved, we've planned, we've built something meaningful. And you sit there and tell us that none of that matters. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said, Catherine cut in. You just told us that everything we've worked for, everything we've built, everything we value is meaningless to you. Because you value the wrong things, I said, and immediately regretted it. The explosion was immediate and devastating. The wrong things. Dad roared, standing up so fast his chair fell backward. We value hard work, responsibility, contributing to society, building something lasting. What exactly is wrong with that? You value appearances more than authenticity, I shot back, standing up to meet his anger with my own. You care more about what other people think than about what actually matters. What actually matters? Mom's voice was ice cold now. Jessica, what actually matters to you? Because from where I'm sitting it looks like nothing matters to you. Not your family, not your future, not your responsibilities. That's not true, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. Isn't it? Michael leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. When was the last time you came to one of my client events to support my business? When was the last time you helped Catherine network at one of her firm's functions? When was the last time you did anything to contribute to this family's success instead of dragging it down? I opened my mouth to respond, but realized I didn't have an answer. Not because I hadn't done those things, but because I'd stopped being invited to do them years ago. We've given you every opportunity, Mom said, her voice steady but her hands shaking slightly as she reached for her wine glass. Every connection, every recommendation, every chance to prove that you could be the daughter we raised you to be. And you've thrown it all away, Catherine added. Every single opportunity wasted. Because they weren't opportunities, I said desperately. They were chances for me to become someone I'm not, to live a life that would make me miserable. Miserable? Dad's laugh was bitter. You think having a stable job and a nice house and a respectable life would make you miserable? Do you know what actually makes people miserable, Jessica? Poverty. Instability. Watching your family be ashamed of you. The words hit like physical blows, each one landing with precision in the places I was already wounded. You're ashamed of me, I said quietly. It wasn't a question. The silence stretched between us, filled with 31 years of disappointment and failed expectations. Finally, Mom spoke. You're officially dead to this family, she declared, her voice calm and final. She picked up her fork and took another bite of roast beef as if she'd just commented on the weather. Everyone else nodded and continued eating, like they hadn't just witnessed my execution. I sat there in shock, watching my family calmly finish their dinner after delivering what amounted to my death sentence. The normalcy of it was somehow more devastating than if they'd screamed and thrown things. Catherine asked Michael about his vacation plans. Dad commented on the wine. Mom complimented herself on the seasoning of the roast. They chatted and laughed and acted like I wasn't even there, like I'd already ceased to exist. I quietly checked my phone, more out of habit than any real expectation of distraction from the surreal horror of the moment. That's when I saw the notification that changed everything. Congratulations. Your article, The Hidden Environmental Cost of Fast Fashion, has been selected as a finalist for the National Environmental Journalism Award. The winner will be announced at tomorrow's ceremony. Please confirm your attendance. I stared at the screen, reading the message 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The National Environmental Journalism Award was one of the most prestigious honors in my field. The prize included a $50,000 grant and guaranteed publication opportunities with major magazines and newspapers. I'd submitted the article 6 months ago and honestly forgotten about it. It was a piece I'd spent 3 months researching, interviewing factory workers, fashion executives, and environmental scientists. I'd traced the journey of a single t-shirt from cotton field to landfill, exposing the devastating environmental and human costs of cheap clothing. It was exactly the kind of work my family dismissed as meaningless. I slipped my phone back into my purse without saying anything. Let them finish their dinner. Let them feel righteous about cutting me out of their lives. Tomorrow they'd understand exactly what they'd thrown away. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and deliberate exclusion. When it was time to leave, no one said goodbye to me. No one walked me to the door. I might as well have been invisible. I drove home to my studio apartment that's barely bigger than their walk-in closet, and spent the evening researching what to wear to an awards ceremony I'd never imagined I'd be attending. The next morning I put on my best dress, a simple black number I'd bought for job interviews, and took an Uber to the Marriott downtown. The ceremony was being held in their largest ballroom, and when I arrived I was stunned by the scope of it. Hundreds of journalists, editors, publishers, and media executives filled the room. I recognized faces from television, names from bylines I'd read in major publications, people whose work I'd admired for years. And somehow, impossibly, I was here among them. The ceremony began with recognition of various achievements in environmental journalism. I sat in the back, my heart pounding as they worked through the categories. Finally, they reached my category. The award for Outstanding Environmental Investigation goes to... The presenter opened the envelope with dramatic flair. Jessica Harrison for her article, The Hidden Environmental Cost of Fast Fashion. I think I stopped breathing. The room erupted in applause as I made my way to the stage on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The award was heavier than I'd expected, a beautiful crystal structure that caught the lights and threw rainbows across the stage. Ms. Harrison, the presenter said into the microphone, would you like to say a few words? I looked out at the audience, at all these accomplished professionals who were applauding my work, and felt something shift inside me. Thank you, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. This award represents 3 months of research, dozens of interviews, and countless hours of writing. But more than that, it represents the power of journalism to expose truths that powerful people would rather keep hidden. The applause grew louder. When I started this investigation, people told me that fashion journalism wasn't serious, that environmental reporting didn't matter, that I was wasting my time on topics that didn't pay the bills. I continued. But sometimes the work that matters most is the work that other people don't understand. After the ceremony, I was approached by editors from 3 major publications, 2 documentary filmmakers, and a literary agent who wanted to discuss book opportunities. Business cards were exchanged, meetings were scheduled, and suddenly my freelance career was looking very different. By the time I got home that evening, my phone was buzzing constantly with congratulatory messages from colleagues, interview requests from journalists, and social media notifications. The news of my award was spreading through journalism circles faster than I could track. But the most interesting messages were the ones from my family. The first text came from Catherine at 7:30 p.m. Saw the news about your award. Congratulations. Then Michael at 8:15 p.m. Mom told me about the journalism thing. That's actually pretty cool. Then Mom at 9:45 p.m. Jessica, we need to talk. Can you call me? Then Dad at 10:20 p.m. Saw your name in the newspaper. We should discuss this. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch in my tiny studio apartment, looking at my award and thinking about how much my life had changed in 24 hours. The next morning there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find my entire family standing in the hallway, looking uncomfortable and awkward. Jessica, Mom began, we think there may have been a misunderstanding yesterday. A misunderstanding? I repeated. We had no idea you were working on such important projects, Catherine said quickly. If we'd known. You would have what? I asked. Treated me differently? Respected my choices? Not declared me dead to the family? Dad cleared his throat. We may have been hasty in our judgment. Hasty, I said. That's one way to put it. The thing is, Michael said, and I could see him struggling to find the words, this award you won, it's kind of a big deal, isn't it? It's the most prestigious award in environmental journalism, I said matter-of-factly. And the prize money? Mom began. $50,000, I confirmed. Plus guaranteed publication opportunities with major magazines and newspapers. The silence stretched between us as they processed this information. Jessica, Dad said finally, we owe you an apology. Do you? I asked. Because yesterday you were very clear that my work didn't matter, that my values were wrong, that I was an embarrassment to the family. We didn't understand, Catherine began. You didn't try to understand, I interrupted. For years, you've dismissed my work without ever asking what I actually do, what my goals are, what I'm trying to accomplish. You write about cat food, Michael said weakly. I wrote one article about sustainable pet food manufacturing, I corrected. One article out of hundreds. But that's the only one you ever bothered to remember, because it fit the narrative you'd created about my life. Mom stepped forward. We want to make this right. How? I asked. How do you make right years of treating me like a failure? How do you make right telling me I'm dead to you? How do you make right dismissing everything I care about? We could celebrate, Catherine suggested tentatively. Have a family dinner to honor your achievement. I almost laughed. You want to throw me a party now? Now that my work has been validated by people you consider important. Jessica, please, Dad said, and for the first time in my adult life I heard him sound desperate. We made a mistake. We judged you unfairly. We want to fix this. I looked at these people who had spent years making me feel small, who had questioned every choice I made, who had valued their own comfort and social standing over my happiness and well-being. Here's what's going to happen, I said finally. I'm going to continue doing the work I believe in, writing about the topics that matter to me, living according to my own values. If you can respect that, if you can support me even when you don't understand what I'm doing, then we can rebuild our relationship. Of course, Mom said quickly. We want to support you. But if you go back to treating me like a disappointment the moment the spotlight moves on to something else, if you decide my work only matters when other people say it matters, then we're done. Permanently this time. They all nodded eagerly, promising to do better, to listen more, to respect my choices. But I could see the calculation in their eyes, the way they were already figuring out how to leverage my success for their own social benefit. Over the next few weeks, I watched them try to insert themselves into my newfound recognition. Catherine mentioned my award to her law firm partners. Michael brought it up with his clients. Mom and Dad started bragging to their neighbors about their award-winning journalist daughter. But they still didn't read my articles. They still didn't understand what I wrote about. They still only cared about the external validation, not the actual work. 3 months later, when the media attention had died down and I was back to my regular routine of freelance writing, their support began to waver. Catherine stopped mentioning my work to her colleagues. Michael went back to making jokes about my career at family gatherings. Mom and Dad returned to their subtle criticisms and suggestions that I should look for more stable opportunities. The only difference was that now they added, "Of course, we're very proud of your award," to the end of their complaints, as if that somehow made their disappointment more palatable. I realized then that nothing had really changed. They hadn't learned to value me for who I was or respect the work I chose to do. They'd simply learned that sometimes my work received recognition that reflected well on them. That's when I made my decision. I used the connections I'd made through the award to land a staff position at a major environmental magazine. The job came with a significant salary increase, excellent benefits, and the opportunity to work on investigations that could make real differences in the world. But the best part was that the magazine was based in Portland, Oregon. 3,000 miles away from Sunday dinners where my worth was measured by other people's opinions and my success was only valued when it served someone else's agenda. I moved to Portland without telling my family about the job until after I'd already relocated. When I finally called to let them know, their reaction was predictable. "You moved across the country without discussing it with us?" Mom's voice was sharp with hurt and anger. "I'm 31 years old," I reminded her. "I don't need permission to move." "But what about family dinner?" Catherine asked. "What about staying connected?" "We can stay connected," I said. "But on different terms. I'm not going to spend every week defending my choices to people who only support me when it benefits them." The conversations that followed were difficult, filled with accusations and hurt feelings on both sides. But slowly, gradually, things began to change. Without the pressure of weekly scrutiny, without the constant criticism and comparison, I found I could have actual conversations with my family members. We talked about things other than my career failures and their disappointments. We discovered that we actually had things in common beyond shared DNA and childhood memories. Catherine called me after reading one of my articles about corporate environmental responsibility. "I had no idea companies were doing that," she said. "This is actually really important work." Michael sent me a text after I published an investigation into sustainable investing. My clients are asking about this stuff. Could we talk sometime about what you've learned? Even mom and dad began reading my articles, not because they reflected well on the family, but because they were genuinely interested in the topics I was covering. The distance had given us all space to see each other more clearly. 2 years later, when I won a Pulitzer Prize for a series of articles exposing corruption in the EPA, my family's response was different. Instead of immediately bragging to their friends or trying to leverage my success for their own benefit, they called to tell me how proud they were of the work I'd done, how important they believed my reporting was, how much they respected my dedication to environmental justice. And for the first time in my adult life, I believed they meant it. The studio apartment they'd once mocked had become a lovely one-bedroom in Portland's Pearl District. The car they'd called embarrassingly old had been replaced with a hybrid that fit both my budget and my values. The career they'd dismissed as worthless had become a source of meaningful work and financial stability. But more importantly, I'd learned that family relationships don't have to be prisons. They can be bridges if both sides are willing to meet in the middle. Sometimes you have to be declared dead before you can truly come alive. Sometimes you have to be rejected before you can find your real value. And sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having people who don't understand you remove themselves from your life, creating space for you to become who you're meant to be. The notification that changed everything had been waiting on my phone all along. I just needed to be pushed far enough away from the table to finally see it.